Hi, my name is Alex Smith, member of LANS, and I'll be presenting this edition of our weekly updates. For more updates and other party content, visit our website at jalans.org. That's JALANDS.org. You can also follow us on Twitter at LANS_JA. LANDS_JA. This week, we'll be taking a deep dive into the attempted UIC March on Parliament, which took place on the 22nd of September, 2021. Throughout August and September 2021, the United Independence Congress, or UIC, mobilized its base and supporters alike in several walks for liberty. These walks served as preemptive protests against COVID-19 vaccination mandates. While the government of Jamaica has not yet mandated residents to take a vaccine, Jamaicans have watched European and North American governments require public sector workers and select private sector workers get immunized. Regardless of government policy, some of the island's businesses have implemented mandates ahead of the state. These generally come in the form of denial of entry without possession of a vaccination card or a recent negative COVID-19 test result. Jamaicans are therefore already facing the decision of whether to comply or to be deprived of some form of their way of life. In response to the CBM Communications' own mandate, the UIC called for a boycott on the television station, plus additional boycotts of all business ventures of CVM owner Michael Lee Chin. Making its own voice heard on the matter of pandemic policy, the UIC published a petition in the form of a 5-point pandemic plan on the 1st of September. The plan included demands to 1. Close borders to visitors while compensating tourism workers, 2. Eliminate duties and taxes on pharmaceutical imports, 3. Undo restrictions on civic freedoms and engender public health education, 4. Implement a public emergency council inclusive of the Office of the Prime Minister, Ministry of Health, all registered political parties, leading public and private sector entities, and civil society groups, and finally 5. To have the Judiciary, Auditor General, and Contractor General provide oversight for such a council. With its position clear, and riding on the momentum from its walks for liberty, the campaign seemingly culminated in a call for a march on Gordon House, the meeting place of the Parliament of Jamaica, scheduled for the 22nd of September in downtown Kingston. The march would focus on the reversal of jabs for jobs, COVID-relating curfew measures, and resumption of in-face school uncoupled from students' vaccination status. UIC leadership sought the public's registration to the protest and engaged in a recruitment drive in the days leading up to the 22nd. The day before, the JCF released a statement warning that the protest would be unlawful. The statement cites provisions of the Public Order Act requiring 3 days' notice and prohibiting unlawful assembly, plus the need to limit gatherings as per the Disaster Risk Management Act. The police's statement was officially concerned with both prior notice and approval and mitigating the spread of COVID-19. Despite the police's warnings, the march began as scheduled. On the 22nd itself, the Jamaica Gleaner reported that a crowd of marchers convened at the Ward Theatre, across from St. William Grant Park, and roughly 6 minutes' walk from Gordon House. The crowd had a mix of masked and unmasked persons. At the theatre, the JCF is said to have confronted the gathering and to have given a final warning that any march would be unlawful. UIC President Joseph Patterson countered, asserting his and everyone's freedom to walk about, speak their mind, and to bodily autonomy for a vaccine mandate. Same-day reporting from Nationwide News Network confirmed the hundreds-strong gathering's agreement with Patterson's remarks. Nationwide noted a sample of placards with slogans like "No vaccination, no separation, no segregation." Yet the Jamaica Observer quoted Patterson's insistence that the march was not anti-vaccine. The UIC leader described his mobilization as pro-choice, using similar language to that of the movement for pregnant patients' free access to abortion. All three outlets report that the JCF proceeded to arrest marchers at the theater and that the only physical violence came from the police. Cops arrested regular marchers first, then continued with visible UIC leadership, including President Patterson, David Thompson, Kevon Harris, and Abigail Thompson. The JCF recorded Patterson's arrest and published the video on its official Twitter account. In fact, Superintendent of Police Steve McGregor told the Gleaner that footage of the march as a whole would be used to arrest more protesters. In the meantime, all four UIC leaders are out of custody, And Nationwide reported the day after that Patterson was released from the Central Police Station on bail after charges of breaching the Public Order and Disaster Risk Management Acts. According to the aforementioned Observer article, the Rastafari Advancement Foundation and the Jamaica chapter of the Nation of Islam were also present, indicating a coalition of movements. Foundation President Shekhal Rose compared the lax enforcement of crowds at government offices and political meetings to the quick response to the UIC's march, upset at the apparent hypocrisy. Nation of Islam spokesperson Clive Mohammed cautioned against, quote, a vaccine that has not been proven safe for 100% of the people. Mohammed continued, lamenting that the State of Israel, praised by those who recognize it for its rapid rollout of vaccines, is administering third booster shots and only counting those with boosters as fully vaccinated. He asked the crowd, have you ever heard of a vaccine wearing out? Now, vaccines can and do wear out all the time. That's why there's an annual flu vaccine. As another example, those immunized from tetanus receive up to 6 doses from childhood to adolescence, with more recommended every 10 years. Additionally, while COVID-19 isn't the first coronavirus disease, it's a new one. Virologists, epidemiologists, and public health authorities worldwide are responding to it before it's been fully contained. They're building upon previous work, and it's entirely possible that such work hasn't caught up with the evolution of the COVID-19 variants just yet. Plus, some vaccine formulas may be more robust than others in this regard. The rhetoric that would help here would state the problem in these terms. There are multiple vaccine options out there, not the COVID-19 vaccine, not one vaccine. They work differently, and all of them are used in a race against an evolving virus. We don't know everything, but what we do know is that the risks associated with contracting and potentially transmitting this coronavirus are worse than those associated with any World Health Organization approved vaccine. For one thing, getting a jab doesn't put you in the position to transmit the virus. Contracting it does. Another point of unambiguous contention is the march's apparent stance on vaccines themselves and other mitigating measures like the use of face masks and physical distancing. It is true that UIC has not stated an official position on whether to support or oppose the use of COVID-19 vaccines. It's also true that UIC President Patterson affirmed that neutrality during the attempted march. Yet a march, a protest, any kind of mobilization is first and foremost a show of political force. In numbers and in messaging, protesters make their line and demands known. They reinforce it within the public domain, usually at the expense of others. If the most visible messaging within a march is anti-vaccine, uncritically so at that, without any paired messaging encouraging the use of vaccines, someone's personal stance or their organizational neutrality doesn't matter. Your political resources push an anti-vax agenda. If that's not the intention, it's a weakness to be addressed. If that is the intention, then what the organization believes and does are intrinsically opposed, which is a more fundamental issue. Above and beyond those concerns is the simple matter of keeping your marchers and those around them safe. March or no march, there's still a pandemic. Yes, people get close in lines. Our national infrastructure leaves us woefully unprepared for a public health emergency of this kind. You can be correct about crowding at shops and offices without letting that excuse doing the same thing at a march. Plus, having a mix of masked and unmasked persons at a shoulder-to-shoulder crowd with over 100 people and COVID-19 around is plainly reckless. If for no other reason than protecting marchers' identities from the police and other adversaries, masking up makes sense. Leading and participating in a march means ensuring the safety and security of those involved. Doing so definitely entails accounting for everyone before and after, checking for anyone missing or arrested, but it also entails basic health measures. Despite all of the above, we can't dismiss the UIC as some small, upstart entity. Everything starts out small and from some beginning. And the UIC isn't even starting. It's over 7 years old. In terms of getting people out on the streets, building upon previous successes, and raising demands that resonate with people, the UIC is doing something right. The transition from walks to the march on Gordon House had to take an organization which functions. Collaborating with other groups on a common issue took an organization which functions. Keeping abreast of detainees and arranging bail are signs of an organization which functions. The biggest sign is doing all that for a set of demands people can get behind. Looking back at the UIC's 5-point plan, Jamaica's dependence on tourism holds us back from a speedy COVID recovery. It's a dependence since we're compelled to import from visitors' countries, the hoteliers keep growing by concentrating most of the foreign currency, and whatever economic activity is left is rarely industrial or value added. It holds us back since tourists come here to relax and be served, and would not want to take a vaccine they haven't already first. What's unclear is where the money to pay tourism workers will come from. Perhaps the UIC hasn't resolved that yet, or is leaving it to the current government. What is clear is that by calling for closure to visitors, the UIC is hitting on a sensitive issue that most Jamaicans are affected by and have some stake in, to varying degrees. Moving on, were the current government capable of eliminating duties and tariffs on pharmaceutical imports, it could very well meet the stated goals, as per the plan, of making all COVID-19 treatment and prevention options available, as well as reinforcing the country's public health system with the resources it needs. Yet another initiative which would go a long way is public health education. Much of the remaining vaccine hesitancy around can be understood as a lack of actionable information or distrust in authorities, whether health authorities or authorities in other domains. It's pretty easy to become jaded and disaffected when the state encourages you to do something, your place of work all but forces you to do it, and yet it's up to you to decide how to go about it and to weigh the costs and benefits without honest, transparent, central, and widely disseminated information. Not to mention the blunt, strong-armed, and discriminatory manner in which other COVID-19 protocols are used and abused. How is someone supposed to be on board with taking yet another vaccine in abnormal, anxious times while contending with all of this? The last actionable demand, the Public Emergency Council, seeks inclusion, true representation, and a cross-section of the political landscape. Elements within LANS have called for third parties to coordinate and concentrate demands they have of the state, yet elevating itself and other organizations like it into a state institution assumes Jamaicans can hold the UIC and whoever else ends up on the council accountable. This isn't to say that the UIC doesn't or could never have the requisite mandate. It's only to say that were the council to be formed, any Jamaican has to ask, can I hold it accountable? Does it have a mandate? We can't end things by taking note of where the UIC's words and deeds land with people. If we take the UIC seriously, and we see points where we might agree with it in part or in whole, we have to watch for how the state and professionals connected to it react. Not just how things go in court, but in terms of how it relates to the demands raised before and during the march on the 22nd. While early and possibly premature, there already is some sort of response. The aforementioned 23rd of September nationwide report has Professor Denise Eldemeyer-Scherer dismissing the march as futile. She remarked that it targeted the wrong institution, jumping the gun towards a parliament rather than businesses mandating vaccination. She also was disappointed in a lack of individual research and education. Eldemeyer-Scherer ended her comments with a retort and a conclusion. 1. The marchers, in their demand to have a choice against vaccination, forget that one's choice can go the other way, towards it. And 2. The private sector will continue to mandate on its own terms, and this campaign will lose in the face of it. If what Professor Eldemeyer-Scherer is saying reflects the state and can be taken somewhat honestly, then the UIC and groups like it will have to keep going. Professor Eldemeyer-Scherer is right about the role of and legitimacy in targeting the private sector. The prior moves against business mandates will have to be redoubled or reoriented. Most interestingly of all, her disappointment betrays an individualistic approach to a collective problem. We're all supposedly in this together, but the ones leading the effort to vaccinate and protect people from COVID-19 are not the ones with the largest responsibility to lead the education effort. The state is clearly not taking up the responsibility for making the rigorous case for vaccination, particularly with the volume of misinformation and disinformation around. How will the UIC respond to this stance? How will other movements outside the state respond to it? Which parts do we concede? Which do we reject? And which do we overcome? But does this mean we join forces with the UIC? Not necessarily, not even for the sake of pandemic relief. Overall, LANS is a group by and for the Jamaican left. That means taking a critical stance on capitalism and on both what is possible and encouraged within it. The current government of Jamaica is on a protracted campaign to bring things back to normal. To be sure, there's value in normal. Normal is familiar. Normal can be followed, and some sort of order to follow is better than none. For those who capitalism fortunes, there's something comforting about going back to work, running businesses like they once were. Yet this could very well be the same work and the same business that both led us and left us unprepared for the COVID-19 pandemic. Remember, normal got us here. I contend that the UIC also wants to get back to some capitalist normalcy. After all, that's the starting point to achieving the unregulated capitalism it desires. Its platform is thoroughly pro-business, treating freedom as the maximum capacity to relate to workers and the wider society through enterprise and the minimum government interference, leaving administration to technocrats. It's a class freedom, a capitalist class freedom. It's the kind of freedom that has you throwing up shields around everyone rather than confronting class tensions and other axes of oppression head-on. The kind of freedom suited for those who do or seek to exploit others' need for work or for a roof. The kind of freedom that has you understanding public health decisions as only choices rather than varied capacities to take charge of one's own health and to navigate the world in a healthy way. This is by no means a thorough analysis of the United Independence Congress or its ideology, but it suffices to say that the UIC has not demonstrated interest in solutions that both meet the majority of people's needs right now and put that same majority on the trajectory of preventing this kind of pandemic from happening again. Reforms as moderate as the state buying food surplus and quickly distributing it as food aid, rent cancellations, mortgage moratoriums, loan forgiveness, and guaranteed access to utilities, all things Lance called for last year, are a start. In fact, they're so moderate that the richest capitalist countries have the slack to temporarily implement them. And you don't need NIDS for any of this. You need logistics and organization, a movement willing to do it. So what's there to learn from all this? Related to the COVID-19 pandemic, we have to 1. Determine which policies keep us safe and which just bring things back to normal, plus evaluating whether they meet the interests of our movements. 2. Look for societal vulnerabilities in public health that lie beyond hospitals, clinics, and pharmacies. And 3. Counter with our own policies, initiatives, and demands, which assume that people seek to collaborate with us in weighing the costs and benefits of potential solutions, rather than just leaving them to their own devices. In general, things are a bit different. On the tactical front, in terms of what to do now, we have to maneuver around the law and other political forces while keeping all our comrades safe and secure. This means anticipating state repression of our actions. Operationally, we build on our momentum, and we always keep in touch with comrades and the people we're politically accountable to in our lives. Strategically, though, we always look for solutions that can both meet immediate needs and push on through to addressing the systemic vulnerabilities those in our movements face. This has been Alex Smith, member of Lance, with your weekly update. Thanks for listening.